Hello everyone, welcome to the video lecture series of mobile application development. Our today's topic is fragments in Android and how can we add fragment dynamically, that means at a run time in Android. Students, in our previous session we have talked about how to add fragments statically, or we can say by using the fragment tag in XML file. But today we are going to learn about the adding the fragment at a runtime. That is, when you try to run your code, the fragment will be added. That is known as a dynamic programming. So obviously it can be termed as to add a fragment dynamically in your project. Fine. So once again, hi, this is Janish Shah, your instructor. Students, let's start with the first thing that we need to very understand is fragment manager. Students, to add the fragment at a runtime, what we need two different classes. The number one is a fragment manager and number two is a fragment transaction APIs. So why we need the fragment manager? So fragment manager is used or to perform the various type of operations, like to when you try to add fragment, when you try to remove the fragment, or want to replace the fragment. At the time, the fragment manager is there to manage all these activities. So if you try to add the fragment in the backstack termed as if this is my fragment number one. Okay, when I click on some button and the fragment 2 appears over it, fragment 3 appears over it, fragment 4 appears over it. So this is a stack. Same as the activity stack, the fragment contains its own stack when you try to add one fragment on another one. So this is nothing but we can say this is all about the fragment stack, or we can say backstack. So what we want to do over here, if we want to add something, remove something, or replacing something, or if you want to add the fragment at the backstack or remove from the backstack, what you need? You need fragment manager class. So here each set of fragment manager class are committed together as a single unit that is known as fragment transaction. See, when you try to commit this action, if I want to add the fragment and try to commit it, then it becomes a transaction. So the transactions callback transaction methods will be managed by the fragment transaction. So, and the whole transaction is managed by fragment manager. So what we have, students, here we have the different types of methods, like one is add on backstack change listener. So when you try to add in the backstack, like fragment 1, fragment 2, fragment 3, fragment 4. So when you try to change backstack method, or I can say try to add something or remove something from the backstack, then this method is called. It works as the same as a button on click listener. Okay, so it's nothing but when you try to add something or remove something from the backstack, then this method will be called definitely. Next one is a begin transaction. If you want to make a transaction object, or if you want to start the transaction, then the begin transaction method should be called. Next we have the find fragment by ID. Students, if you know that where we have a fragment, and if you want to find your fragment by using ID, like same as the JavaScript, we have the various type of methods like document.getElement by ID, document get element by tag name, document got element by the class name, various type of methods. Same like in Android, what we have the find fragment by ID. So if you want to find the fragment by ID, then you can use this method. Then we have the find fragment by tag. Okay, so next one is a pop backstack. Pop backstack, this method is used to remove the fragment from the backstack and execute pending transaction. Okay, so what we usually do during the transaction, that after the completion of the transaction we should call a commit method, because the commit method is allows you, or it we can say it authenticate you that your transaction is successfully completed. Fine. So the execute the pending transaction method is nothing but it is used to force the commit the transaction. Next, when we talk about the fragment transaction API, so what is our idea behind the fragments? our idea behind the fragments to create the interactive UI. And to create the interactive UI, the user should change the dynamically the one fragment with another or one screen to another screen. Okay. And when the user try to apply some action, the screen should respond according to it. So to make some dynamic UI, we come up with the idea of the fragments, and in the fragments we have the fragment manager, which can be used to add, remove or replace the fragment at a runtime, and to perform such type of action, students, when the fragment gives some response. And each set of fragment actions or fragment changes, when you try to commit it, it is called by the transaction. Okay, and the transaction is managed by the fragment transaction API. Now, so let's move further that how can we add the fragments dynamically, or we can say at a runtime. So the steps are pretty much common, same as the previous one. So what we did in the previous one, let me just remind us little bit. The number one, we just first need to try to create a fragment XML layout. Number two, we try to create the Java file, or I can say the class file, which extends the fragment class. So the two things are there. The step two, first number one, try to create the XML layout for the fragments. Step number two, to create the Java file for the fragments. Step number three, to link between the Java and the XML file of the fragments. Okay, set up the layout over there. Step number four, create fragment tag. So what happens over here? See, we are not going to create any fragment tag, but the three steps are very much common, same as the previous one. Okay. So here, students, you can see the step number one is to create another layout for the XML fragment. Step number two is create fragment by extending the fragment class. Step number three, create the layout XML file for the fragment. So all three steps are common. Now, what about the next? Next, students, host a layout that will host a fragment. That means you need to create a layout on which you are going to host a fragment. Remember this. Step number four is different over here. Okay. So now what we are going to do is we are going to make a layout on which we need to host a fragment. Now next, to write a code to add fragment to the activity in activity.java file. And last step is to need to write a code, call a method like add fragment method. We need to create that and need to write that method into Java file. Okay, to add the fragment. These are the 5 steps to add the fragment. Now let me show you the simple code for that. So very first step, see, this is a preseed fragment screen, that before creating the fragment we have just only the Java file and the source file. Now how to create a fragment? You just need to create a fragment by click on the right click on the layout file. Okay, and then create a fragment. For that I will show you this definitely. So there is a layout. This is again, I'm clicking on the right click on the layout file and create one fragment sample.xml. What I changed over here, I changed nothing. Okay, so this is my text view and this is my frame layout. I changed nothing. I have just added the background color over here, nothing else. Okay, so next step is, so this is our XML layout file, students, for the fragments. Next, this is our Java file for the fragments, okay, which is automatically created by the Android Studio. If you want to create by your own, then you can create it by extends the fragment and then just override the on create view method. So this is how, students, you can create the sample fragment or Java file. And this is, do not forget to write down the extend the fragment class over here. Next, students, if you want, the third number step is that set up a layout or XML layout file. Okay, so this is the step number 3. See, to write down, to connect your layout ID with over here like r.layout.fragment underscore example 2. This is how you can connect your XML file of fragment with the Java file. Next, so step 3 is host a layout that will host a fragment. So finally we are going to host a layout. So see, there are various type of layouts through which you can create the fragment, like relative layout, inner layout, frame layout. But what we need to focus is we are going to focus on the frame layout, because frame layout is pretty much standard layout for the fragments. It will supports the fixed position of the fragments as well. We'll learn about the frame layout later in my layouts video. But till now, let's just understand we are going to take a frame layout. So this is, see, this is a linear layout in the activity, main activity. Okay. If you have the constraint layout by default, then you can change it to the linear layout. Okay. Else what you need to do, you can make a constraint for the same for each and every component which you are going to add over here, view components. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a frame layout over here. I just removed the text view. Okay. I just created a frame layout. Give the width match parent, height match parent. That means whatever the screen size, it will just consume that much amount of screen. Then the ID is a frame container one. This is very much important. Do not forget to give ID to the frame layout. Okay, as we are giving the ID to the fragment tag in the previous session, and in this to add the dynamic, do not forget to add ID to the frame layout. So here my ID is the frame container fragment container 1, and the margin is 5 dp. This margin is just for the see the difference between the activity layout and the fragment layout, nothing else. Okay, next one is, so this is our activity main. Do not forget to write this code in activity main .xml file. Okay, now what up to next? So next is, students, to write a code to add a fragment in the activity in the Java file. So how to write a code to add the activity in the Java file? Okay, so for that, students, we need to create a method which is known as protected void add fragment. So add fragment is nothing but add fragment is the method that we need to create to add a fragment. Do not forget to write this method in main activity.java file. Okay, so now the step number 1 is to make a method add fragment. Step number 2, to create the object of the fragment manager. Okay, so get fragment manager to manage the fragment transaction. What is our goal? Our goal is to manage, to add the fragment. For adding the fragment, what we need to apply the transaction, and to manage the transaction, what we need fragment manager. Fine. So first we need to create the object for the fragment manager, then we create for the fragment transaction, and then we'll do the add method. So second number step is get a manage fragment manager to manage the fragment transaction. How to get it? The syntax is fragment manager object fragment manager is equal to get support fragment manager. So by calling the get support fragment manager method, students, you can create the object of the fragment manager. Now, next one is step number 3 is a create a fragment transaction objects. So to create a fragment transaction object, you just have to write down like this. See, like fragment transaction object is equal to, by using fragment manager object, call a method which is known as dot begin transaction. So fragment manager dot begin transaction is initiate the fragment transaction object. Next, step number 4 is to create object of the sample fragment class. See, we have created a fragment manager object. By using the fragment manager object, we are going to create the fragment. We are just going to start the transaction, and now it's a time to add your fragment to this transaction. How to do that? First, you need to create a sample object. That means whatever the fragment you have, you just need to create the object for that. It's like this: sample fragment 2 is equal to new sample fragment 2. And then what you need to do is, see, you just need to call a method like this. See, the fragment transaction dot add fragment transaction dot add. This is a very important method. You are just need to create a layout id. See, the frame layout, we have given the id to the frame layout. That id is like r dot id dot fragment container 1 comma sample fragment 2. The object of the fragment should pass over here. This is a main logic to add a dynamic fragment. What you did, you just need to pass the two different parameters. Number 1, that shows the fragment container id. Okay, that means a frame layout id from the activity underscore xml file. Okay, and the second one is a fragment sample fragment 2. This is an object. Whatever the fragment you want to add, you just need to pass the object over here. And the last method is just commit the transaction. By committing the transaction, you can complete your perfect transaction view. So this is how, students, you can add a dynamic transaction. So this is your final transaction code. This is your void add fragment method, and it should be written over here in main activity.java file. Now it's time for the live programming practice. So let's start. How can we implement this? I have already written the code. I'm just going to show how can we implement this. Okay, just wait for a while. So students, this is my main class. Okay, for first what we need to do is I'm just going to create a layout file. I'm just showing you. Okay, see the new, it's a fragment. In the fragment blank fragment, and this is a live dynamic fragment 2. Okay, so my layout name is fragment live dynamic 2, and just need to click on the finish button. It will take some amount of time to building and generating the sources for it. Okay, so this is my live dynamic fragment 2 file. Okay, when you created the fragment, just try to remove the everything from the code. Okay, just keep only one method, that is known as on create view. Okay, so I'm just deleting each and every method from here. This is my finally on create view method is there. See the fragment live underscore dynamic 2. This is our layout file, so it should be under the layout. So see, this is fragment live underscore dynamic 2. Let me go towards the code file first. So here it is. Instead of the text, let me just write down live demo 2. Okay, this is what we have. This is nothing but it's our fragment text. Okay, let me give some background color to it, so it will be can differ from the activity. So it's a background. Okay, so background color should be, let me first add only one color. It should is a black. It will take amount of time to change it. Okay, so it's nothing but it's a black color what I take it. Okay, now I can change it. I from the this, so this is my, let me take it as a purple 700. No, wait a minute, till 700. Okay, so this is my activity color, sorry, fragment background color. Now this is my activity main, students. I have already created a frame layout over here. Okay, this is the layout. Width is match parent, height is match parent, id is given, that is fragment container 1. Next, layout margin, it's a 5 dp instead of 5. Let me just change it to 15 dp. Okay, nothing else. This is the linear layout I have created. I have also given to the tools, sorry, background color is purple 200. So my activity background and the fragment layouts can be different, so you will get the better idea for that. Now what I need to do, that I just need to go into the main activity file. This is my main activity, and I have created one protected void add fragment method. First I want to create a fragment manager. Object is fragment manager, and call a get support fragment manager method. Then the fragment transaction object is created. By calling the begin transaction method, I can create a fragment transaction object. Now see, this is a sample fragment 2. Let me just comment this section. What we have, our class name is students live dynamic fragment 2. Okay, let me create the object for that. That is a live dynamic fragment 2. Live dynamic fragment 2 is object is equal to new live dynamic fragment. Object is created. Now what I want you to do, I just need to add this object to the particular frame layout. So this is my frame layout. If you want, if you can see, this is my activity underscore main file. This is my frame layout. The id is given. The id is fragment container 1. The id is fragment container 1. So what I need to do is I just need to add the id over here, that is fragment container 1. And then how to add id, let me just add it again. Students, what I need to do, I just need to create an id for that. So this is the id, like r dot id dot fragment container 1 comma, we just need to pass the object, that is a live demo fragment 2. So this is how I can do this. Okay, now let me just open up, let me just show how my screen works. Now let me just run this program, student. This is the commit method. So when I just start to run the code, and it will show you the output. Just wait for a minute. So students, I have connected this another smartphone to showcase the output of this application. So this is my phone. Okay, now let me just run this program. What we did, see, we did just added one fragment container over here and the object of the live dynamic fragment 2. My fragment live dynamic 2 in the XML, I have written a text is live demo 2. Okay, so let me just show you how the application works. So let me just click on the run button and wait to application get executed. Okay, so what we can see over here, we can see my application is successfully completed. So this is a fragment demo exm. My project name is there, app name is over also again there. Live demo 2. So this is my first fragment which I have added dynamically. Okay, now let me just show you change the code and let me show you this. So this is my sample fragment 2 class. So fragment underscore sample string, let me just change it to live demo 1. Okay, so let me just change the text and instead of the fragment 2, let me just add it and make an object of fragment 1. So let me just uncomment this code, that is a sample fragment 2, and let me show you how it works. See, so new sample fragment 2 is a object, and now sorry, instead of uncommenting this, let me just comment the live dynamic fragment 2 and add the object of sample fragment 2. So now what happens, students? The sample fragment 2 is our class. So object of sample fragment 2 will be object. Okay, so object of the sample fragment 2 class will be added. So what we have written over there in sample fragment XML, we have written like live demo dash 1. So the live demo dash 1 will be our output. Instead of the till 200, let me just change the color of this, so we'll get the better idea. So the color is let me take it as blue color. Okay, so blue color is there, purple 700, and let me run the output. So this is our application. So let's just wait for a while, the application will build. Okay, the phone is okay, just wait for a minute, students. Students, let me just run this code and show you how it works. So here it is. So wait for a while, the application is currently going on. It may ask you to terminate the previous app, and this is our application. Okay, so you can see this is live demo 1. Okay, so what we did, so students, in this session we have seen that how we can enter dynamically the fragments. In the next session we'll definitely talk about the activity life cycles and how the life cycle of the activity and the fragment life cycle both can correlate with each other. We'll talk about the program for that. Till that, if you have any doubt, then please feel free to ask me. Thank you so much.